year you read the IEP and they're going to learn all the addition tables. And the next year you read the IEP. In other words, the expectations go down. And this ought to be throwing up a red flag. If my child is getting more complex as a result of the services that are being provided, whether it be in a public or a private school, then I need to do something about it. The other pattern that we saw in Florida, they have a system of, call it severity, and it's actually based on the level of number of services that a child has. What we would see as a child starting at a 251 in second or third grade, which would be the lower end of the severity scale. And after 2 or 3 years, they're up to a 253 or a 254, meaning the complexity of their learning problem has not been addressed, and therefore they're getting secondary problems come into play. So when you're doing a good diagnosis, you not only have to get the primary problem that's existing, but you have to go after the secondary problems that are being accumulated or happening as a result of the lack of the original problem being addressed.
We see that a lot through behavior and academics. Behaviors affect academics, academics affect behaviors. And if you're not addressing both of those issues, one of them is going to shoot off. The next thing I want to have our panel discuss is accountability and the program structure that they're using. What kind of mechanisms do you have in place, Dr. Hardman, for making sure that your program is accountable?
Well, let me shift. My program is a private school that's been there for quite some time, and we are child-oriented, parent-oriented, so our accountability levels are very high. When we started the McKay Scholarship Program, there was very little accountability on the side of the public schools or private schools or parents in the original bill. The original bill is a true parent choice bill. As we went along, the problems began coming up both on the public and the private side. There are those who will always try to capitalize. And so we had a commission put together by Senator McKay for the Senate, and it was equally between the Republican senators who were pro-choice and the Democratic senators who were opponents of choice. And we had public school people and we had private school people, and I was on there as well. And what we did was to come back and say, let's put the responsibilities where they need to be. Now, in Florida, we don't go through the districts. Once a child is identified in the public school and has an IEP and a parent chooses to move their child to another public school, because in many instances you'll have one district that'll have maybe an excellent program for an autistic child or an excellent program for LD, and the district right next to them may have nothing at all. And so we not only can that parent go to another, they can go to another public school or they can go to a private school. So we're allowing them the choice of moving their child to where they are going to get the services they need. But what we did was to come in and build in rules for each one of the players, for the parents in the legislation, for the Department of Education, for the private schools, and for the we're going to leave out parents, public school, private school, and districts. But technically, the districts are pretty well out of the loop. Once the child moves over, they lose the responsibility for the child. The child goes in under a different pool. Now, that's with the McKay Scholarship Program. We also have a corporate tax credit program, but that also comes out of the state level, not the district level, eliminating some of the problems that the district may have. So, accountability standpoint is different from the private sector than it is in the public sector. It doesn't matter whether you're a public school or government in general. Public is a process. If you've checked off all the boxes, you're accountable. In the private sector, you're accountable by the product, what the product you put out there. And so, whenever you're accountable in the private sector, it's not checking off all the boxes and becoming just like everything else, a cookie cutter. You have a great deal of diversity, but your accountability is to the parent. And let me tell you, they hold you to a high level of accountability. And because you're seeing them, talking to them, dealing with them on a daily basis, you're not talking huge numbers. The reason the public sector has to do process is you're talking huge numbers. And so you've got to try to control the numbers. In the private sector, we're almost a one-on-one. So there's a lot of difference in the accountability there. We require fiscal accountability from private school to the state, but the accountability for the student goes directly to the parent. I don't know if that helps or not, but very high level of accountability because parents leave you and you fold.
Dr. Thomas, the issues of accountability with your program?
Again, it's ultimately going to come down, in our case, to the parent. It also can come down to the school district in which we're partnering with. And one of the things that I would point out again, as far as with the individual parents, it's not unusual for our staff to meet with 5 to 7 parents a day over issues. Our normal business hours are 8 to 4:30. I picked up the phone at 20 minutes to 5 last evening, and it was a parent that was having some concerns, and so that's not ignored. Immediately got a hold of the therapist. The therapist and our lead therapist are processing and what needs to be done to be able to get back in touch with that situation. I think from an accountability standpoint, again, is that certainly on the private pay side, is that if they're not satisfied, as Dr. Hartman pointed out, is they certainly can pull and go where they choose at any point in time. Likewise, as far as the school district, is St. Louis City, if a special school district, if they do not feel that the agency is performing at the level that they should be performing, then they have that right to be able to make that change. Ultimately, as far as with DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, likewise, as far as the criteria. One of the things that I would commend both St. Louis City schools and special school district on is some accountability measurements that they have put in of looking at the agencies, and to where, as I say, I'm starting my 14th year at Logos. For the first 8 to 10 years, I was very frustrated because an agency was an agency was an agency, and it didn't seem to make any difference, particularly what was being provided or what was not being provided. And that has changed now both within the county and within the city, as to where they're looking at certain criteria and wanting to make sure that the agency is performing at those